Hadith, Eye of the Beholder. I heard Allah's messenger saying, Allah does not take away the knowledge by taking it away from the hearts of the people, but takes it away by the death of the religious learned men, till when none of the religious learned men remain, people will take as their leaders ignorant persons, who when consulted will give their verdict without knowledge. So they will go astray and will lead the people astray. It seems that a major worry for Muhammad in later years was that the proper version of his religion would eventually be forgotten or changed. Not necessarily by malice, but eventually even by people who knew him and had proper instruction. Now, it is likely that this is what made his career necessary in the first place, at least in that mindset, that God's true religion had been forgotten over time. And if you're founding a religion, well, that is a very logical concern. What happens after I die? What if this religion is corrupted? What happens if this thing I am accusing other religions of, straying from originalism and the true path and what was originally there and all that, what if that happens to my religion? And it's a valid concern. The theory goes like this. Eventually, the religiously wise, they die out, and the faith becomes a copy of a copy of a copy, and it gets distorted. It's a concern as old as revealed religion itself, at least the larger sort of codified religions. But that's not why I picked this. I chose this because when you're looking at this through a Christian lens, it's just almost hilarious to see the level of projection that a Christian would put into this. Like, this statement is just dripping with irony, considering the claims that Muhammad was making, and specifically what he was saying about things like Judaism and Christianity. It's a religious version of the two movies on one screen phenomenon, which is exceptionally common at this point in American life in the 21st century. It could be the exact same message, but it will be heard in wildly different ways. And what I'm looking at here is how it would be seen and heard on the Christian side of the screen. Now, on Muhammad's side of the screen, you have him giving his theory for the deterioration of religion, how it happens. It's not the hearts of men. Well, maybe it is a little, but it's not really the focus here. But it's actually a severed link in the transmission of knowledge. Now, this is what he blamed for the Jews and the Christians of his time not accepting him as a prophet. Now, the idea was, okay, these people, they don't get it. Somewhere down the line, these people lost their way. Now, what's the proof of that? They don't think I, Muhammad, am for real. And we disagree on some things. And my message is from God. So therefore, it has to be right. And of course, that was always Muhammad's trump card. He played it often. So those still clinging to the old ways, these are people, Muhammad says here, that give their verdict without knowledge. And then ignorance begets ignorance, and so on. And it was a good argument in his time. Well, at least it was a good argument within his own community, among people who believed he was a prophet of God. However, the Christian retort here is pretty obvious. Well, that is, unless you're being a bit too polite to point it out. We will be doing no such thing. Not out of malice, but again, this is a show about intellectual and spiritual exercise, thinking about things, and maybe in ways that other people have not thought of them before. Okay, so the Christian retort here, the sort of impolite, blunt, honest retort would be, the whole reason These people, meaning Jews and Christians, the whole reason that they were not converting, but the pagans were converting, is because, first of all, the pagan religion was terrible. And it was obvious while they were converting. That's not controversial. But the Jews and Christians, that's a whole other thing. All right, and these were also the conversions he craved. I mean, for monotheistic street cred, if nothing else. Okay, so the Jews and Christians, the group we're talking about here, they did not convert because they thought the thing that Muhammad was accusing of them doing here in this hadith, giving a verdict without knowledge, is precisely what Muhammad was doing himself. And from a Christian perspective, Muhammad never gained the proper knowledge to understand either Judaism or Christianity, and especially Christianity. He had an experience, and the zeal of the convert caused him to get a bit over his skis, theologically speaking. And by the time he was learning actual Christian doctrine, an entire religion had just been constructed that simply could not, due to its nature of revelation and earlier claims, it just could not be amended. That would be like the Catholic Church rescinding specific dogma on Mary, for example. Now, that's never going to happen, because to do so would be an admission that this particular theory of revelation was incorrect. And if that falls, the entire church falls. You have the same situation with Muhammad. He can't go back and say, oh, I think I understand this better now. Then the entire theory of revelation collapses. So it's the Quran. It is what it is. And it has to be, or else it's not divine. And then Muhammad would have this sort of argument boomerang on him. So Christians, to be blunt, would be accusing Muhammad of giving a verdict on the nature of God without knowledge. And on top of that, this specific thing was something Christian scripture had warned people about, and doing something very similar to what Muhammad is doing here. So to Christian believers, Muhammad was doing what the Apostle Paul had warned his community about 600 years earlier, because Paul told his people that if, later on, anyone preached a gospel that was anything other than what he and the real church were teaching, that they should disregard them. Even if the message is delivered by an angel from heaven, do not be fooled. Now, that message is in Paul's letter to the Galatians. And just imagine how this all looked to anyone who knew the New Testament well. Even if it comes from an angel from heaven. Now, where did Muhammad get his message? An angel from heaven. It's an interesting and fascinating coincidence, if it is a coincidence. But that's for another time. Back to the transmission of knowledge theme here. Through a Christian lens, as a Christian looks back at history, at what could have been, Muhammad, in the Christian mind, I think, could have been a major saint. He could have been Saint Patrick of Arabia, Muhammad of Arabia, the great saint who converted the entire peninsula, or even beyond that. Now, how different does this look if, say, Muhammad, hypothetically, had the religious education that Paul did? Paul was a Pharisee before his conversion, and then was willing to learn even further about his new faith after his conversion. And he learned it so well that he would later win a famous argument with Peter himself. Peter, the rock of the church, who knew Jesus personally. Now that's how it's done. That's impressive stuff. Or if Paul's not a good example, what if Muhammad did what St. Patrick did? What if Muhammad went to Byzantium and became ordained and maybe even made a bishop, and then returned to Arabia to convert the people? This is Christian fantasy, to be certain, but just imagine, say, marrying apparitions in Mecca. But obviously that didn't happen. Christians would say, as a criticism of this hadith, Muhammad was actually the one talking when he should have been listening. Just as Muhammad would say, these followers of corrupted religions needed to be listening to him, as should any other follower afterward. Now, who was really giving a verdict without knowledge? It's two movies on one screen. And the answer lies in which screen that you actually see. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next time. Inshallah.